So this is going to be the S23 Ultra versus the S22 Ultra. Should you be getting last year's model, or should you get the brand new S23? Or if you already have the S22 Ultra, should you be considering an upgrade? Let's talk about it. Starting off the hardware and the design, you're going to see that they look very similar from afar. The lenses just poke out of the back, and then you got this boxy, mostly boxy design on both of them. But there's some small minor differences that they've changed on the S23 Ultra. So first, those lenses are just a little bit bigger. So any case that you have for the S22 Ultra, or if you purchase a case for the S22 Ultra and try to put it on the S23, it's not going to fit perfectly. You're going to notice that the lenses are just a little bit bigger. So the whole area for the camera array is just a tad bit bigger this time around. But either way, that's the main difference when it comes to those lenses. The other thing is going to be that the design on the sides of the S23 Ultra are this time just have a flat finish. Instead of on the S22 Ultra, you have a rounded finish. So the display on the front of the S22 Ultra curves around, as does the back. And when they meet, the side right here is just rounded, versus on the S23 Ultra, it has a little bit of a curve on the front and then just a little bit of a curve on the back as well. But when they meet, the side here is completely flat. So what that means is that in the hand, I find that the S23 Ultra just adds a little bit more grip to it. Of course, both of them are still a little bit slippery because they're glass, but still just a little bit more grip when you're holding onto it. And also what's changed on the bottoms, or I should say on the corners, the bottoms are still flat both on the top and at the bottom. So on the corners, there's still like a 90-degree feeling to it, so they both can still dig into your palm a little bit. But you'll notice that it looks like the S22 Ultra just feels a little bit sharper because it's got more of a rounded corner, versus on the S23 Ultra, it's got more like a squarical, however you pronounce it. It's like a squarish look to it, but it's still a little bit rounded. So it's not as pointy in a way, but you can still feel it in your palm. Overall, both phones are still relatively big and heavy. They're glass and all that stuff. So what's different though is that it's using a different material. So on the S23 Ultra, it's using the newer Gorilla Glass Victus 2, versus on the S22 Ultra, it's using the Gorilla Glass Victus Plus. There might not be a huge difference. I think what they've been working on is more of the shatterness, but it's still probably about the same when it comes to scratching and stuff like that, because they're very much prone to scratching. On the S22 Ultra here, I have a decent amount of like minor scratches, not like major cracks and gashes and stuff like that, just small scratches from my usage from the past year. But either way, small improvements there. Both of them are still IP68 water and dust resistant rated, and they also have an aluminum frame on the sides. I already talked about the finish as far as the build there. And the colors, you'll see here they have the green colorway from last year, and this time I went for a Samsung exclusive colorway for the S23 Ultra, that being the sky blue. Traditionally you get like this newer military green, the black, a cream, and a lavender, and then you get the exclusive colors for the S22 Ultra. I don't think the exclusive colors are available anymore, so you get a green, a black, and I think there was one more color, a burgundy I think was what it was. But either way, the colors aren't colorful and vibrant, but still a handful to choose from. And I personally always use a case on my devices. I personally been using the speaking cases on both the S22 Ultra in its lifetime and also on the S23 Ultra. And one thing I noticed too, not sure if it'll be the same for all cases, but for the speaking cases, I noticed that they also replicated the flat finish on the sides of the S23 Ultra, versus on the S22 Ultra, the design of the cases are also just a little bit rounded. So again, adds a little bit more grip when it's in the hand. So I actually like that. I like that they did that to, I guess, better fit the phone itself, but still continues that flat side, which adds grippiness. And going to the rest of the phone with the hardware, you have the same buttons and ports. So you have USB-C at the bottom, you have your down, fire, and speaker, which by the way are actually better than last year. So they sound not only a little bit louder, but just overall have a little bit more bass and fullness to it. So overall, when it comes to watching videos and listening to music, I prefer it much better on the S23 Ultra. And you'll also find your SIM card slot at the bottom. No dual SIM on this model, and also no SD card slot. So in case you didn't know that, you don't get micro SD card. Haven't been having it for a while. And then you have your S Pen, which both of them are relatively the same. The only thing that's different is I found that the very top part, the clicky part, or the end, whatever you want to call it, the design is just a little bit different. It's more of a squared off rounded finish looking to it, versus the S22 Ultra pen. It's kind of like replicating the design of the phone, where it's more rounded, more like a oval kind of look to it. Very, very small difference, but where it where I noticed it was when I tried to take the S22 Ultra pen and stick it into the S23 Ultra. That fit, but when I did it vice versa, so I took the S23 Ultra pen and stuck it into the S22 Ultra slot, it wouldn't click in. So that's the only major difference I saw. Everything besides that is pretty much the same. So the main black body is just black for the S Pen, and then you got the color of the aluminum frame at the top tip, or end, whatever you want to call it, but they both function about the same. There is a newer Bluetooth 5.3 on the S23 Ultra, but I'm not sure if it's using that with the S Pen, and they should have about the same latency when it comes to the responsiveness when actually using it on the screen. And it all has the same features, so you can take notes, you can take screenshots with it, you can use it as a gesture tool to either control your music or use it as a shutter button for your camera and stuff like that. So personally, I don't use the S Pen as much. This was my first year with an S Pen built into the phone. Like, I've never had a Note phone before, and I honestly didn't really take out the S Pen. So definitely the S Pen's not for my lifestyle and use cases. So it's an extra bonus, but really it's something I'm not going to use. But that's something I still have on here, and there's not going to be major changes going from the S22 Ultra to the S23 Ultra. And then lastly, you have your power button and your volume rocker in the exact same spots where the volume rocker is over top of the power button. So personally, I think it's fine. It's in a lower position. It's pretty comfortable to get to. Now, getting onto the displays, both of them are going to be pretty similar on the outside. There might be some small differences in the technology being used, but for the average person, this is going to be a 6.8-inch 120 Hz 1440p dynamic AMOLED display. It's a great display on both of them. They're both big, colorful, bright in the sunlight to get anything done. So when it comes to just scrolling around, it's a smooth experience thanks to that 120 Hz. It's also a great experience for watching content, big, like I said, colorful. But even though they both are pretty colorful, I did notice that the S22 Ultra just looks a tad bit more vivid. And I notice this more when you have the eye comfort shield turned on. So I usually use it in adaptive mode so that it changes throughout the day, similar to the True Tone on the iPhones. And so what I noticed is that some colors just the display overall looks very natural and just dull in vivid mode on the S23 Ultra versus on the S22 Ultra. Some colors look a little bit deeper, a little bit more vivid and rich. So not sure what's going on there, if that's just a display panel thing or if it's a software thing. So hopefully maybe they can adjust those settings and the software in a future update, because definitely a little bit noticeable, but to the average person, you only really notice it when you're comparing them, or if you've used this phone before and are switching to the S23 Ultra. So just keep that in mind for right now. If you want the most colorful display out there, then currently S22 Ultra, for me at least, is looking a little bit more colorful. But overall, minimum intrusions as well. So you have those curved displays which have a little small bezel. Again, the S23 Ultra does have a slightly less curved display, so you do feel it and notice it just a little bit less, but nevertheless, it is a curved display. And then you have those minimum bezels on the top and the bottom, no real change made there. And you have that single camera cutout down the middle, which that does use your facial recognition. So for biometrics, you have facial recognition there with the camera, which works relatively okay. It may not be the most secure out there, but it's pretty fast and reliable. The inner display fingerprint sensor, again, I don't think there's much of a change there. I found that it's pretty much the exact same speed and reliableness. So for me, it's perfectly fine. So overall, hardware design and display, it's small, minute differences, and some differences are for the good. As far as the performance, you are going to be getting the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 worldwide on the S23 Ultra, no more Exynos. With my model has the 12GB version with 512GB of storage, just because they're doing that pre-order bonus, where if you pre-ordered, you get to pay for the 256GB storage model, which is the base model, but you get the 512. And on the S22 Ultra here, it does come with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 or Exynos, depending on your region, but this is right here a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 with 12GB of RAM and then 256GB of storage. This was the second tier from last year. The base model from last year had 128GB of storage and then 8GB of RAM. So they improved the base model, which is great, but both of them are the second tier. They're not the base models, so they do come with 12GB of RAM. The base model does come with 8GB of RAM on both of them. Just something to note there is that the RAM is a slightly faster RAM and also a faster storage when it comes to read and write speeds, but just keep that in mind as well. Not major difference, I would say, for the average person, but for someone who may be transferring stuff all the time and requiring memory and storage and that stuff, they might notice it. But either way, day-to-day performance, you're going to be getting great performance on both of them. For your everyday stuff, which for me is like watching a ton of YouTube, Disney Plus, Hulu, whatever, sports and all that stuff, consuming content is great on both of them, and his phones can handle that with no problem. It's definitely overkill for that. And then browsing around like Reddit and Instagram and your basic shopping apps and all that stuff is no problem for these devices. Multitasking is no problem for these devices as well. You can watch a video and then browse another app, either in split screen mode or go into picture-in-picture. No problem on these devices. The most I ever do to push these devices, either play an occasional game or use the cameras, which even then I don't really do either that often. But when I do it to test these devices, I noticed that the S22 Ultra would definitely warm up just a little bit more compared to the S23 Ultra, and so that will definitely translate to better battery life as well. But we'll get there in just a little bit. But as far as the performance, I found that even though it did get warm and sometimes to the point that it got hot, it was still able to perform relatively well. Now, once you left the game and started to scroll around really quickly, I will notice occasionally some choppiness and some delay every now and then. But on the S23 Ultra, I didn't notice that, I would say, at all. It could have happened and I just didn't even notice it. But it just felt like it was performing really well after some major heavy usage. And when it also got really hot on the S22 Ultra, the S23 Ultra was warm. It definitely warmed up, but not to the point that it was hot sometimes. So that's a big improvement there, that the chip on the S22 Ultra, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, definitely runs a bit hotter compared to the 8 Gen 2. So that's really good in my opinion. So overall, I would say that they're both really good when it comes to performance, but the efficiency and I guess heat management of the S23 Ultra of the Snapdragon is definitely better. Now, as far as the software, the S23 Ultra does come off the latest One UI 5.1 versus on the S22 Ultra, it is One UI 5.0. So there's not a huge difference when it comes to the two versions, but some small minor things that might have changed. Personally, I didn't really notice much, but for the most part, you will be getting that update eventually on the S22 Ultra. And this One UI overall comes with a lot of features. So if you've used One UI before, you're gonna find it no different on the S23 Ultra. You got all the available customization when it comes to the stock settings, as well as when you download Good Luck. If you want to go ham and go crazy with your efficiency and productivity settings and customization, feel free. Some of the things that I personally do is, for one, I always download Good Luck and get Home Up. One of the things I like to do is just change it so that the labels are gone. I prefer to have a clean icon look. Now, granted, you do have to know which icon is what. Sometimes I get confused, but either way, I like that ability that you can do that. I also like to go in and make my widgets stackable. I like to stack the widgets so that I can save the amount of home screen layouts and spaces and pages that I have to keep it minimum. And then also, lastly, the bottom, when you go down to your app drawer, I like to customize my app drawer so that each page is an individual actual page of a specific app. So one page will be Samsung, one page will be Google, one page will be entertainment such as games, apps, or not apps, games, social media and streaming applications, and then you have your regular apps and so on and so forth. So I personally like to do that. Sometimes I'll even create folders in there depending on how I'm feeling. But there's just so many customization features when it comes to One UI 5.0 and even previous One UI versions. And then the multitasking features is just insane. I love the ability that Samsung allows their users to, when it comes to multitasking. So for one, you can force every app, doesn't matter if the developer made it compatible or not, to go into multitasking mode, which basically allows you to either split screen the actual app, so you can have one app at the top, one app at the bottom, as I've mentioned before, and then just use two apps at the same time. The main reason I use that is for putting YouTube at the top and then browsing another app at the bottom, and it's pretty much full screen mode. I mean, you get a pretty big screen here. You can take advantage of it there. Or I use picture-in-picture with YouTube and then browse another app in full screen. You can also drag and drop apps with the edge bar, which is another feature that I love. It's not new to One UI 5.0, but I love this feature. You just hide away this little edge bar that brings up either all your apps or a collection of your apps or settings and stuff like that, and you just drag and drop the apps that you want to use. I just think it's a fabulous way to multitask, in my opinion. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, like I won't get into a lot of it. And one of the things I did notice that you can do now is use Bixby, I forget what it's called, but where you can answer the call for you, similar to how Google has their has their Google Assistant that'll answer the calls for you. Now the Bixby can do it as well. I wish they would just integrate the Google thing, because if they did that, it would just be the perfect smartphone in my opinion. It would be a perfect smartphone if it would use the Google Assistant features like the screen calling and all that stuff, plus Samsung's multitasking One UI features. It'd be the perfect device. But either way, I find software to be very good on both of them. It's a very similar software, and you'll be getting support on these devices for a long time. So the S22 Ultra is a year older, so you will be only getting 3 years of major OS updates, which is still a good amount of time, and then 4 years of security updates versus on the S23 Ultra, the newer version, it'll get 4 years of major OS updates going forward from today, and then 5 years of security updates. So whichever one you choose, you'll be getting long support when it comes to software updates. Now, when it comes to the cameras, both of them are going to provide you with a fantastic camera system. Granted, I don't fully take advantage of everything that they offer, or even really use my cameras that much on all my phones, I should say. But there are some small minor differences that they made, or changes that they made from the S22 Ultra to the S23 Ultra. So for one is some hardware stuff. So the lenses, the wide lenses changed. So instead of a 108 megapixel lens on the S22 Ultra, you now have a 200 megapixel lens on the S23 Ultra. On the front, there used to be a 40 megapixel, and now there's going to be a 12 megapixel. There was this all binning thing that they did, so it wasn't a full 108 or a full 40 megapixel shot, but either way, both ended up coming up to 12 megapixels. But talking about the actual real world quality that you get from them, both of them are great. So some of the small things I noticed though was that on the ultra wide and the main lens of the S23 Ultra, the tuning was just a little bit different, or overall I would say the color tuning was a little bit different. So I found that the wide and the ultra wide of the S23 Ultra was just a little bit warmer compared to the S22 Ultra, which was a little bit cooler and I would say closer to natural looking. But then once you got to the telephoto lenses, it completely flipped. So then on the S22 Ultra, it was a little bit warmer, and then on the S23 Ultra, it was a little bit cooler. So it's kind of weird that they did that. I'm not sure if it's something that you can change with an update from Samsung, but you could probably tweak that in post as well. But either way, that's some of the small things I noticed. But overall, the photos though, we're good as far as quality. You get a max zoom, or that space zoom of 100x on both of them. Still not the greatest. Even on the S23 Ultra, they haven't really improved it much, if at all. But it's there if you want to use it as a party trick, or if you actually want to use it. 30 megapixels, 30 zoom is actually pretty usable in my opinion. So the fact that it has 100 may not be the greatest thing ever, but you can still get to a nice solid zoom when it comes to 30x. And as far as the front-facing camera, I already mentioned it went from a 40 megapixel to a 12 megapixel, but even then, no change in detail or overall quality. Both looked really good. I did notice though that the S22 Ultra did look a little bit warmer. Now you did have the option to pick between a warm shot or a natural shot. I believe you also had that option on the S22 Ultra, so I might have had the warmer option picked. But either way, you do have those different options when it comes to what kind of color you want. Other things I noticed was that because the S22 Ultra was a 40 megapixel camera lens, it did have a better natural bokeh effect where the background was just a little bit blurrier. And then also they both have the autofocus, so you can put another subject in front of your face and it'll be able to autofocus or focus onto that subject, which is overall pretty good. So whichever one you pick, you're gonna get a good selfie camera on this as well. Now when it comes to the video, there's some small differences as well, but for the most part, very similar and both very good. I personally just record everything on 4K 30, which at that point, they both look really good. Again, the only major difference is gonna be a little bit in the color tuning, where the ultra wide looked a little bit warmer on the S23 Ultra, but then once you switch to the main and the telephotos, it was very hard to decide or even pick anything different or majorly different in my opinion. They both looked good, well stabilized, good detail. There's nothing more I can say. They both also capped out at 20x zoom, so not much of, or not any improvement when it comes to the zooming in capabilities for video. So overall, I think video is pretty good. But some other modes that I noticed some differences is, first, let's talk about 8K. Will 8K become the new norm? probably not anytime soon, but you do have the ability to record 8K 30 now, which is a little bit smoother in its frame rate. I personally prefer 30 FPS, so I never touched 8K on the S22 Ultra. I'll likely never touch 8K on the S23 Ultra as well, but now that it's 30 FPS, maybe I'll consider it. And it also is less cropped in, so you get a wider shot. So it's pretty good overall, I would say, well-detailed video, but it's a big file or storage eater, so I probably won't end up using it. Another mode I noticed a difference in was the super steady mode. So you toggle this on and off if you want to, and now I noticed that you can go up to quad HD on the S23 Ultra, meaning you can record in 1440p. Before, it was capped out at 1080p, so now you can get a little bit more detail, a little bit finer quality, which is all overall pretty good. And just to point it out, 4K 60, I thought they would maybe improve it where you can switch between the lenses while you're recording. You can't, so basically you have to pick whichever lens you want to choose in 4K 60, and then you're stuck with that. Otherwise, any zooming in will be digital. So just keep that in mind. They didn't really improve that when it comes to the 4K 60. And video in the front, again, not really much difference here. 4K 30, 4K 60, you have both options. And just the only difference, again, was the tuning in the color. So where the S22 Ultra just looked a little bit warmer versus a little bit cooler on the S23 Ultra. And if you really looked, again, that bokeh effect, you might see a better bokeh blurriness background behind you with the S22 Ultra. But otherwise, both good quality, well stabilized. It's a good video on the front. And then both devices are also pretty well optimized for most social media apps. So for example, for me, for Snapchat, I found that the quality and color and all that stuff replicated pretty well going from the actual camera app to the Snapchat app. So camera quality looked overall pretty similar, so I'm happy with either. So whichever one you pick, if you want to record for maybe even TikTok and Instagram, at least for Snapchat, it looks pretty good. Now lastly, battery life. This is where I saw the best and most improvement from the S22 Ultra to the S23 Ultra. So thanks to that Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, with the efficiency of it, it absolutely rocked it. So I went from having maybe 5 to 6 hours screen on time with a total usage of like 12 or 13 hours to the same amount of screen on time, sometimes a little bit more, maybe like 7 or pushing it to 8, with either a whole day's worth of battery with a little bit less screen on time, or the same amount, or maybe actually like 14 or 16 hours of actual usage with a lot more screen on time. So I know everyone's usage will definitely vary, but the improvements are there. It's definitely there. You will definitely notice it if you're coming from this phone, or if you're coming from a way older phone or a different phone. If you want a phone with really good battery life, the S23 Ultra is a strong contender in this world. It's great battery life from what I experienced. The charging speeds though are pretty much the exact same. I did see a couple of videos and noticed that some users are saying that the phone can charge up a little bit faster. From my experience with the cable that comes in the box and the 45-watt charger I have from Samsung, I'm not sure there's a new one out there or something like that, but they charge at the same speed. I got an hour and like 12 or 11 minutes when at like 5 to 3% battery life left. Both of them were taking just a little bit over an hour. So keep that in mind that I think there are some improvements, but you do have to buy, I think, another cable or also a different charging brick. So take that as you will, but overall, the improvement is gonna be that battery life. It is so much more efficient. So the performance is efficient, and now the battery life is efficient. This new chip is insane. It's also a made for Samsung or for Samsung Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is take that as you will. I just look at it as it's a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, honestly. But yeah, battery life is really good. You also have wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. Same speeds. I believe it's 15 watts for wireless charging, and it has to be a Samsung dedicated one. And then 4 watts of reverse wireless charging. So if you use that, it's there. So which one should you go out and get? The S22 Ultra from last year or the S23 Ultra? Definitely depends a little bit on what you do in your day-to-day and also how much you're spending. If you're going to be spending only $100 or $200 more to get the S23 Ultra, do it. Splurge an extra couple $100 and get the S23 Ultra. But if you're going to be spending like $300 to $400 and money is tight, yeah, I would just go for the S22 Ultra. It's a perfect device. It does have a few flaws when it comes to the battery life and how hot it can get sometimes. But if you're not going to be doing a lot of gaming or using the camera a lot, this phone is fine for you. It's more than enough for you. So definitely think about what it is you're doing. If you benefit from a more efficient chip when it comes to the battery life and the performance as far as how hot it gets, then consider trying to get this one. But otherwise, most people will be just fine with the S22 Ultra. Saving those extra $100 is perfectly fine, or well worth it, I should say. As far as if you already have this device and are considering this device, again, if you'll be benefiting from that battery life and you're only going to be paying a couple $100 to trade in, yeah, it's a no-brainer. But if you're going to be spending $600, $500, I spent $700 to trade in the S22 Ultra just to get this one. So even though I'm losing this one, I still paid $700. Not worth that price. Yes, better battery life. Yes, a more efficient chip, but $700 for that, not worth it. But yeah, that's how I will leave it. If you're only spending a couple $100, definitely trade in. But otherwise, definitely wait till next year. You'll see more improvements. Hopefully more improvements next year. Or consider like a Fold 4. Or better yet, wait till the Fold 5 or something like that. So that's been it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.